I wasn't here obviously last week, but from what I've been told, the discussion was mainly on Marx's critique of the Gotha program,
Yeah.
right? And we never really got into the Luxemburg.
No.
No, not at all.
We didn't do the
So I guess it makes it obvious what we,
have to do.
yeah. So far we've been discussing the idea of democracy, what it entails, some of the difficulties in terms of thinking about democracy in the present context, the present political and the modern world, as it were, in contrast to the ancient cities and medieval city-states. And then we had Marx, of course, as a critique of the liberal understanding of freedom or democracy on the Jewish question. And then with Marx in the critique of the Gotha program, you have already a critique of social democratic politics, social democratic tendencies on the left, which of course become much more significant with Rosa Luxemburg and some of her contemporaries. So I think we have, and I could not find, where's the other one? I could not find, for some reason, my copy of Reform or Revolution. So I just printed up from the internet some of the key chapters. I did find the stuff. So then I think for the next, for today and maybe probably some of next week, there is the question of the debates around in the early 20th century on the left on the question of democracy, where we have as main participants in that debate, of course, Rosa Luxemburg, in opposition to three, of course, key figures on the left, Bernstein, Edward Bernstein, initially, Kautsky, later on, of course, right, both of the SDP, and Lenin on the other side in what happened with the October Revolution in Russia and some of the ideas there. And I think I had assigned only part 2 of Reform or Revolution, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well,
That was I think there was a confusion because I'd sent out 2 reading lists.
Yeah.
And I changed the Luxemburg.
You changed
Russian
the
social democracy.
Similar, it doesn't matter.
What did you assign?
Basically.
Yes, but there's a similar one.
From the reader.
But I brought from Reform or
But which-
Revolution.
So you had intended us to read Reform
I
and
changed I changed the reading.
To
The
what?
first one. The second one was still the Russian Revolution. we
What
should
was the
discuss.
first one?
Can you help me find the
There's-
reading for today?
Reform or Revolution Part 2.
Is the
But
reader?
on the initial version, it was
Luxemburg
the problems of social democracy, of German social
Right, that's
democracy.
which is the one I read.
Yes, but that's fine. I think the
Reform and
the
Revolution.
arguments are
So where is that?
complementary.
I think he had assigned.
Probably towards the beginning somewhere.
Yep.
Reform and Revolution
Social-
isn't
Hold
in
on.
the Rosa Luxemburg reader?
It is.
Okay, part 2?
Oh, there. Oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
He had assigned a couple of other.
All right, let me
I
look
think
that
that, I
one.
think you got it.
And then we have
But
Rosa
at least
Luxemburg.
by different articles, by different titles. I don't know, anyway. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's that one and then
Is that the,
Yeah,
okay.
but I'm saying I have a different
Copy.
copies.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But
Gives it away.
one critique, and I changed it because because in Reform or Revolution, not only because it's a very important work in itself, but some of the arguments seem to be, very pertinent today when it comes to things like worker cooperatives and unions and so forth, because that's part of her critique of Bernstein.
When you say part 2, that's the economic development
Yes,
and social?
exactly.
Okay, fine.
Exactly.
Fine. Got to it. Page
And maybe we can just read, to begin with,
That's a good idea.
some of the beginning of part 2 of Reform or Revolution, which is on, the first chapter is on cooperatives, unions, and democracy. And
What page do you have it on?
I'm not sure. It's the first, it's chapter,
it's
it's the
in
beginning
here?
of chapter,
It's in
yes,
here, okay.
yes.
Is, I'm
Chapter
sorry, I guess
Chapter 7.
I keep asking, but is it the same as an
Chapter
essay
7.
called Social Reform or Revolution in this book or not?
Yes,
Okay.
It is.
Page,
Yes.
That's under 5.
page
isn't it?
146.
page
uh,
146.
Perfect. Thank you.
And here, again, she's addressing Bernstein, of course, in German social democracy. And she says here, the translation may not be the same, I'm not sure. Says, Bernstein's socialism offers to the workers the prospect of sharing in the wealth of society. The poor are to become rich. How will this socialism be brought about? His article in Neue Zeit, Problems of Socialism, contain only vague allusions to this question. Adequate information, however, can be found in his book. Bernstein's socialism is to be realized with the aid of 2 instruments: labor unions, or Bernstein himself characterizes them, economic democracy, and cooperatives. The first will suppress industrial profit, the second will do away with commercial profit.
I'm not
Sounds-
finding those words at all.
No,
No?
not those words.
Very different translation.
Yeah, wow. Maybe I'll just grab it online.
Let me see.
Was that one on the Marxist, the Marxist website?
Marx.org, yeah.
Huh. Well, why don't we just go to that one then?
I mean, she's obviously
Marx
talking about
Hour.
Bernstein there.
Marx.
Is that difference of a translation?
Oh,
It's pretty
Yeah.
significant, apparently.
Yeah, really different.
Yeah.
Which one did you say?
is the one on the Marxist.org website the one that he's using?
Yes, that's what I'm using.
That's the one, so I'll
Yeah.
try to grab that one.
Which one did you?
What's the
The book.
website?
Marxist.org.
Marxist what?
Marxist.org.
That one right there.
Marxist.
Plural.
Right, not the
dot
old
org.
one.
Let me go to that.
Let's see if I can get to it.
No, I think it's a different
Section.
work.
Oh,
Different piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so Marxist.
Here we go.
Marxist.org?
yeah, Marxist plural.
Reform
dot
and
org.
Revolution.
Marxists?
Is that
Yeah,
Okay.
Marxist.
What does it say?
Yeah, it's a
Reform and
different
Revolution.
work. It's not the translation.
And then we're gonna go to,
But this is the famous, this is one of her most famous.
That's what's confusing me, because
But
Marxist.org
sometimes,
says it's reform of it.
yeah, Reform or Revolution.
And
What
it
is at the
says
beginning?
contents, introduction, opportunist method,
Yeah.
adaptation of
here it is.
capitalism, but I don't, oh,
Is this right?
cooperatives, unions, democracy.
Yes,
Way down
exactly.
there, that's the
Right.
one.
Is this
you're
the
doing.
right
Chapter
website?
7.
Internet Archive, yeah, I think so.
Is that what you punched Internet Archive?
I just, this is the URL.
Okay, let's see if I can find it.
Okay, so this is,
And I changed it because we had too much on Lenin, and the stuff on Russia was enough, so I changed it to go earlier to the critique of Bernstein. Because I think, why? For number one, because it's a very famous work, and I think is worth reading it. But more so because it seems to speak more, our contemporary dilemmas are not in how we relate to some kind of vanguardist political tendency. Our contemporary dilemmas on the left is the question of social democracy. You know, in the best case scenario, certainly, because at best we have people like Bernie Sanders or others. Or, not only, of course, because there are many people, Rick Wolf, for example, I mean, his argument is one of, right, worker cooperatives as the ultimate goal, but as a stepping stone, as strategy for changing some of the problems we have in capitalist society. And here we have already, of course, a critique of that notion of economic democracy. Because what would it mean? Because one reason I thought it was necessary to go back to someone like Aristotle was to raise the question of, in what areas can one have democracy? And that whole argument, if you remember, between the question of technical versus political activities. That for us to have democracy, you have to have equals. To have equals, then, is a problem if you talk about economic production, because you may have, in the question of production, inequality, unequals, in which case you can't really relate to each other in a democratic way. It's not possible. You can when it comes to equals, and in politics, as Aristotle says, and as Marx would certainly agree, I believe, you have equals.
Can I interrupt for a
Yes.
second? I now have Luxemburg. Now,
Right.
what among this am I looking for?
1900,
1900.
reformer, that's it.
Whoops.
No.
Hit the wrong
One
one,
more.
yeah. Thank you.
Reformer revolution. And then we go to chapter 7, which is
Chapters.
the
Cooperatives.
economic cooperatives union and democracy. There we go.
Thank you.
Right. You see, the system's working. So to go back to that previous paragraph, Bernstein's socialism, as he says here, is to be realized with the aid of these two instruments: labor unions, whereas Bernstein himself characterized an economic democracy, and cooperatives. The first will suppress industrial profit, the second will do away with commercial profits. Cooperatives, especially cooperatives in the field of production, constitute a hybrid form in the midst of capitalism. They can be described as small units of socialized production within capitalist exchange. But in capitalist economy, exchange dominates production. As a result of competition, the complete domination of the process of production by the interests of capital, that is pitiless exploitation, becomes a condition for the survival of each enterprise. The domination of capital over the process of production expresses itself in the following ways. Labor is intensified. The workday is lengthened or shortened according to the situation of the market. And, depending on the requirements of the market, labor is either employed or thrown back into the street. In other words, use is made of all methods that enable an enterprise to stand up against its competitors in the market. The workers forming a cooperative in the field of production are thus faced with the contradictory necessity of governing themselves with the utmost absolutism. They are obliged to take towards themselves the role of capitalist entrepreneur, a contradiction that accounts for the usual failure of productive cooperatives, which either become purely capitalist enterprises or, if the workers' interests continue to predominate, end by dissolving. Bernstein has himself taken note of these facts, but it is evident he has not understood them, for together with Miss Potter Webb, he explains the failure of production cooperatives in England by their lack of discipline. By what is so superficially and flatly called here discipline is nothing else than the natural absolutist regime of capitalism, which it is plain the workers cannot successfully use against themselves. Producers' cooperatives can survive within with the capitalist economy only if they manage to suppress, by means of some detour, the capitalist-controlled contradictions between the mode of production and the mode of exchange. And they can accomplish this only by removing themselves artificially from the influence of the laws of free competition. And they can succeed in doing the last only when they assure themselves beforehand of a constant circle of consumers, that is, when they assure themselves of a constant market. It is the consumer's cooperative that can offer this service to its brother in the field of production. And maybe here, some people here are members of the Brooklyn
No.
The Park
Food
Slope.
co-op thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food co-op?
No.
No.
Like the
Park
county,
Slope.
the county
Park Slope
market?
Food Co-op.
Park Slope, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they threw me out when I walked in.
They threw you out. That's good, that's very nice.
Yeah, no, they,
What did you do, Phil?
I was unescorted, which is,
Oops.
you have to be escorted by a member or by an employee in order to walk into the Park Slope Food Co-op.
Oh, you weren't a member. You
I
weren't
was
thrown
not a
out. You were
member.
just not allowed to shop there.
No, they threw me out. They actually escorted me out the door with two people on either
Oh,
side
my
of me.
God.
Yeah, they did.
Well, they do the same. If you go to one of these warehouse
so-
things, they'll throw you out too if you're not a member, so it's not.
Yeah, that's true. But there they kind of ask you for a card, when you're checking out. If you don't have it, then they won't let you check out, right?
Right.
But with this, it's like, and even because they asked me, so what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm just looking around,
I'm loitering,
I'm trying to see what's going on here, what
not allowed, really?
what this is about. And they were
Amazing.
like, you can't be here.
So see how that's working out, right? Cooperative within capitalism, see how all that works. Yeah, you gotta be a member.
So in addition to our
Bourgeois
previous,
friends go there.
let's say, issues about where one cannot be equals, let's say, you have here the additional critique of worker cooperatives in that, the mode of exchange dominates the production. And if you're going to be a part of the capitalist web of exchange, you're going to wind up having to conform, to modify or intensify the labor process and how the process works if you're going to be part of it. Unless you have, as she notes here, you have your own exclusive consumers, like
They do.
yeah, like the Park Slope Food Co-op.
So it's still this process of exclusivity that's going on, even with the quote-unquote socialist cooperative that is
Well,
the antidote to capitalist alienated exchange. There's still this.
Yeah, well, that might be true, but I don't think that's her main concern. Her main concern is that
not
there's a market.
that this does not represent a model for social transformation. Because if it's going to exist, it's only going to exist in this very marginal sense where you're able to
As a pocket.
where you can kind of have a kind of monopoly of consumers. But otherwise, it's either you resist market discipline and it dissolves, it falls apart. As she says, people say it's a lack of discipline on the part of the workers' co-ops, or it doesn't fall apart and you impose, in which case it winds up being like every other enterprise, in capitalist societies, just with maybe, you could say, well, maybe it's an improvement if everyone is a shareholder and they get a share of the profits. That may be true. But the labor process itself will be more or less the same.
Yeah.
Even if you divide up the profits a little bit more equitably, it's not going to change the labor process and how the
Yeah,
production.
And these
It's
members that purchase
That
are
was
not,
the
the
whole
purchasers are not the same people as the
So we're saying
producers,
that-
right, in these cooperatives?
Junk.
Am I right?
Yes,
Junk
I am right.
politics.
yeah. Well,
It's still, you're going into the store to buy the apple,
Well, with the exception
but you're a member.
With the exception of organizations like the Park Slope, where the workers are, but then they have also employees.
Yeah, but they're not
There's some-
producing the apples. They're getting the
There's-
apples from,
It's
they're
sort of
not
like
getting
a,
all
They're not
their
the only-
stuff from cooperative enterprises. I
Well,
mean, they
that's
get
true
their
too,
stuff where they
that's
can
true
get
too.
cheap stuff.
But to be a member, you have to work,
Yeah,
you have to work a certain number of days in the co-op.
It's really hard to be
Okay.
the cheese guy, apparently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So hard as one. You can't get that job.
Everyone wants that, you have to be
Exclusive,
for
yeah.
like 25 years.
well, then there are these mock-ups. My mom belongs to something called County Market in Maryland, and she pays $150 a year for the privilege of walking in to get, that week's discount on peaches or something. But she doesn't have, she's not required to work there.
Right.
She's just eligible for, the privilege extends only to the discount. anybody, I can go in there and buy something. They won't throw me out unescorted.
you pay more.
Unless I say that I'm escorted by Phil, in which case they're like, get out.
So,
I've got my
she's
picture
kidding
up.
you.
A couple
I'm
of
kidding
years
you.
ago, there was, and you should look out for it online, or if you want, I'll send it out. There was a really provocative piece on Jacobin written by Sam Gindin, who works and things with Leo Panich up in Toronto. And it was basically taking apart, just in this Luxemburgian way,
Right.
the fundamental idea of Rick Wolf's
Exactly.
project.
Yeah.
And it was very comradely.
Right.
I mean, but it was very clear on the politics, which is basically
Yeah.
this, that they will be derailed by competition.
Right.
And then in the wake of that year at Left Forum, there was this big dust-up. Did you go to that?
Not to that
what
point.
year?
Okay, it was a panel that filled the biggest auditorium at John Jay.
And it was Rick and Sam?
Sam didn't go. It was
Oh.
Leo, Rick,
Uh-oh.
and someone from who had written about Mondragon,
Okay.
which is falling apart under the same stresses of
course,
competition.
Of course, of course.
And first there was Leo spoke. I think he was basically echoing some of what Sam had written, and then this woman had done research which was very well defended on. It wasn't polemic, it was just, informational basically. And then Rick. And boy, there was steam coming out of his ears. He was furious. He refuted, basically, just categorically, refuted everything. And he was just like visibly furious
So he didn't read his Rosa.
at this provocation. And he did not talk a long time before he walked off the stage.
Oh my God.
That's okay. That's okay. I've been debating it for, as you can
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
130
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
But I don't understand it because Rick is a scholar. So
Yes.
he knows the politics of it.
Right.
He's read
Yes, but
his
he's been an
Marx.
economist for most of his adult life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think,
Oh my God! Oh my God! You should do impressions. Have you ever thought of doing a podcast?
well, we're going to have one. We're going to start a Patreon account.
Oh,
Because
good.
all of these
They're podcasts. Yeah.
classes will be put behind a paywall. And
Yeah.
people can pay $250 a month, for the
Here we
privilege
go.
of watching us discuss
I
these
pay
things.
Patreon. I do serious stuff. Why not?
Huh?
Are you serious?
I'm always serious. But we'll do podcasts, and Phil will be.
Can do the impersonation.
You can have his own show.
Maybe you're just good at that one. I don't know. That's a good one.
But it'll be very cheap. People can pay a couple dollars a month or $2-3 a month. You pay more already for this class, and you'll automatically be on the Patreon account if you pay for the classes.
She
You'll
looks
get
dubious to me.
That's
Definitely
Micah.
dubious. As a
This
dubious
is America. You pay the money. You get the access.
Yeah.
Money talks, nobody walks away from a bone saw.
Oh my. Anyway.
But I think Rick and others, and not only Rick, certainly, they believe that you have to point to a real living example, and that's one. That people can understand that it's something tangible. People can imagine, yes, working as part of this cooperative and so forth.
Yeah. The
So
problem
that's
is just.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, the problem is just how he thinks it's an answer for everything. Like, I understand that point, but it's not a revolutionary thought or model at all.
Well,
And that's the problem.
I don't share that out, but I'm saying I think there is an argument to be made
That's just like the
because
shortcomings of him.
people want concrete
answers.
victories
Yeah.
or successes, or because it seems ever more utopian and crazy to imagine that, well, okay, there's going to be a revolution and we're going to.
I mean, to what extent is it kind of like what Arto was talking about last hour? It's prefiguring a different way of doing exchange, and in that sense, it's giving people an experience.
Well, it's
His
not, no, it's
ambition
not
is much more than
prefigurative.
that.
It's not prefigurative because the mode of organization is not already, acting out, let's say, what the goal that they want to come up with. It's simply pointing to an existing empirical examples of workers' co-ops and how they've been successful and how that can happen. In the same way that people point to Sweden or these other places and say, yes, you
Denmark.
can have socialized medicine, you can have free universities. It's not some crazy idea. And there's like I say, there's a logic to that. I don't, I'm of a different political tendency. I don't necessarily think that workers' co-ops are the answer to the problems, or even that they're, much of an advancement over what we already have. Certainly we can say that you have something like, let's say, some enterprises that are, where the workers are shareholders. There might be a bit more equitable distribution of the profits. It's still, of course, unequal, and the people at the top are making a hell of a lot more than the people, who do the actual work, but it might be a bit more egalitarian than McDonald's for that,
That's
one
what
of
we
these
just
places.
read in the Marx. You're still a slave.
Exactly, yeah. You're still, wage labor is, is the modern form of slavery in that sense, because you have no control over the working day. And that, like we talked about before,
Self-organization.
the creative dimension to it is lost. You become an adjunct to the process or to the machines. So that doesn't change. And I remember some years ago when I was in Argentina, Buenos Aires, and there were still workers had taken over some of the factories and some of the occupations. So one day I visited. A lot of them were outside. One was inside Buenos Aires. And I went one night, they had a party. And it had been, in the old days, airplane manufacturing, airplane parts. But they had, the days of them making airplane parts in Argentina were long gone, of course. So they were making aluminum, aluminum trays and aluminum foil, these kinds of things. And they would have fundraisers every month or so because they weren't able to sustain themselves just on the production. People who were sympathetic will go and you give some money, and then there's a big party and they have some drinks and music. And so I went and I was talking with the very people there, and I said, how is it now you don't have a boss anymore? Isn't it better like this? I said, no, it's not better. What we would like is, we don't mind having a boss. We just would rather have a regular paycheck, get paid on time, and not have to worry about all this other stuff, not have to worry about organizing everything. Just get our money and then we can go home. So, the kind of subjectivities that are produced in capitalist society, they don't want to have the independence, in a sense. You know what I mean? They want to have, okay, you come in the morning, you leave, you get your paycheck on time, and that's more than enough, rather than, okay, we're in charge now. And that's a lot of work, because you're responsible for everything. You have to throw these stupid parties every month and, be up till 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. So, it's in themselves, it's not the solution, because I don't know how true it is that when you have the experience of being in a co-op, it also changes your subjectivity in a way that now you become more capable of, let's say, being a revolutionary. I don't know if I'm skeptical, I'm saying, based on some of these experiences. I'm skeptical that it works that way, and Phil, I think, agrees, at least when it comes to the Park Slope Co-op.
It's quite
They're not
intense,
more
though.
revolutionary by virtue of working as a co-op. They become.
It has become, however, like at least a short-term solution for people that they suddenly find themselves unemployed, like VMA in Greece, or that
Yes,
people
yes,
just try to
right.
manage.
Right.
Again,
But I don't.
if like as a
But would
long-term
you?
solution is viable, because they face the same kind of problems all the
Pressures.
time. They
But
have
would you
to
say the
raise
experience
money
makes
from
them
here
more
and there.
revolutionary?
Well, you need an ethnography for that. I
An
don't know.
Is the factory in the north of Greece that produces soaps and so forth, and when the company went under, the workers took it over and they produce.
Yeah, it attracted quite some attention because of obviously what is happening.
Have you heard
in
of-
Greece and,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Have you heard of the homesteading movement?